Good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to attend you today to the second webinars of our series of webinars in the framework of the GeoNV project. We will start in 2 minutes. We are expecting 100 people to connect. Many of them are connecting, so we will start in 2 minutes. Thank you for your understanding. Okay, we have passed now the 2 official minutes of delay for the event, and I welcome you again for this webinar. And it's my pleasure to see that some of you were already there last week, so it means that you have enjoyed, or you have maybe some critics to give us today about the event. But we will welcome indeed a dynamic participation. So the topic of the webinar today is to deal with geothermal project as an industrial activity. What is the consequence, and how we can ensure air quality. So it's really my pleasure today for these events to have really good experts and contributors to the discussion. I want also to remind you that, as I say, the webinar today is the second one on air quality. The first one was last week about licensing and permitting. Next week, we will deal also Tuesday morning about seismicity. The week after about social engagement. Notice the number 5 will not be a Tuesday, will be a Thursday about water quality aquifers. And we will continue the 23rd of March with the high-level policy events. And we conclude mid-April after the Easter break on a life cycle assessment approach and the link with sustainable finance. Mark your calendar, but normally you have already received some invitation if you are in our list. If you are not yet in our list, don't receive directly the invitation, feel free to contact us, we will add you. About the agenda today, we have 2 hours discussion. I'll just start with a general introduction as the region of EJEC, but also the project coordinator for GeoNV, because after I will give the floor to Adele Manzella from CNR, and she will present you the recommendation from GeoNV regarding the emissions and the air quality. We will have 2 sessions then, one again as the same format than last week, a national overview, and secondly a roundtable. The national overview will present 3 cases, the Italian case, the French case, and the Icelandic case. I will let later the moderator to present the different speakers. The roundtable, we will have the first presenters, the first session, and then some more panelists from Italy, Hungary, and Germany. I thank you all for your presentation today, for a great debate. I welcome also and invite you, to visit our website. You can find many informations. And with that, I don't want to delay the event, to leave more space and time for discussion. I will give now the floor to Adele Manzella for giving the first presentation. And I hope you will have a nice event. See you later. Adele, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Philippe. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will present, as Philippe said, the recommendation that we developed in the frame of the GeoEnvy project. It was developed with all the work package dedicated to this topic. GeoEnvy is dedicated to many aspects of the geothermal development related to environmental issues. And in Work Package 4, we work mainly in mapping and analyzing regulation and practices among the countries participating in the project, but also with a look to other countries. To develop recommendation for improved regulatory practice. And we are also with these webinars that are now at an international European level, but have been at the national level before, engage with stakeholders and decision makers in developing this recommendation. So improving them and then see how to implement them. The first part of our activity was, of course, the analysis. So we mapped the environmental regulation. They are described in the deliverable that is available online, decision making process mapping, deliverable 4.1. And then we developed our recommendations that are embedded in two main documents, recommendation at European level and compilation of recommendation for an harmonization of regulation. So respectively deliverable 4.3 and 4.2, and they are available on the website. So we are now at the stage of the actions. So we want to understand if these recommendations are okay, if we need to improve or enlarge them in some way, and also debate with you how to implement them. After reviewing all the environmental aspects of geothermal development, by the way, they were we ranked in all the environmental aspects in another work package, and we had a list of many topics of potential effects during the geothermal development. We focused on some of them. Some of them are technical aspects that for some reason are not, we consider them important topics especially for sharing experience among the different countries, because essentially what is clear is that the European and national regulations cover all the aspects. So these aspects are already well regulated. But for some of them, there are either some part which may take an advantage in sharing practices, or because they produce a particular concern in the public. So it's better to clarify better the terms of the topics. So technical topics are seismicity that were picked up are seismicity, airform emission, aquifer interference, and physical disturbance and discharge of geothermal fluids. And among process topics, complex licensing and environmental impact assessment that have been debated, information sharing, local benefits and public participation, and life cycle assessment and finance. And for all of them, we are organizing these webinars. So we are today in the airform emission, and Philippe already showed you the dates for the webinars. So going in the topic of today, so we have this topic related to air quality and emissions potentially potentially impacting during the geothermal development. They are well covered by the European and national regulation, but there is some space for improvement. They are topics that are related both to the well drilling phase, including flow test, and plant operation. Observing and analyzing the regulation and best practice, we see that although most covered by regulation, some threshold, some management of these issues are essentially part of the best practices of the operators, and in some cases covered by national or regional guidelines. We observe, for example, that in the various countries we have different way to monitor, and also the frequency for monitoring and reporting is different. The threshold for H2S, for example, or the methane are different from countries to countries. Mitigation technologies varies. This is not a surprise, because also the condition varies, but it is important to clarify how and why, and also monitoring data availability is very different from country to country. So when we went to list the recommendation, we took into consideration all these, all the notes that we did in the analysis. We, for this topic, we distinguish recommendation related to the well drilling phase. And for us, the main recommendations are related to monitoring, air quality monitoring during the well drilling. Should be enforced within the drilling yard. The air quality monitoring during the well flow test, this should be a common practice. It is already common practice in some cases, in most cases, but it is much better to establish it clearly and for any case. So during flow test outside the drilling yard, gas monitoring should be enforced. We also propose to install the blowout preventers at wells in all cases, and enforce mitigation plan to prevent accidental emission during drilling. And these mitigation plan include many aspects, not only monitoring, reporting frequency and so on, but also trained personnel, safety exercise, well design, maximum flow test during the drilling, total emitted volume. These are aspects that are covered in some cases, but are not clearly defined. Data reporting to the authority is, of course, a main rule to follow. During plant operation phase, we have a similar, but not exactly the same list of recommendation, because it is important to set air quality standard for pollutants, which are not covered by EU regulation, because there are some reference, but not standards. Air quality baseline, also in this case, before plant operation starts. We propose a continuous or frequent air quality check in all conditions, and plans, monitoring and abatement plans to contain emission. Only in case of predictable significant emission, we propose total reinjection to imply and enforce total reinjection or adoption of abatement system, and continuous monitoring. Beside mitigation measure to guarantee and also to prove that these aspects are well managed during the geothermal development. We also propose further research and innovation in a set of topics that are not standard or at the commercial level, but requires further insights. First of all, zero emission plants, total reinjection, to become a standard in the future. We are not there yet, but we have to pave the path toward this goal. And so this requires further research and development. Another important topic is the understanding of natural emission, because we need to understand also the real contribution of the emission at the power plant. I give you a very briefly a view of what is these aspects. We know that in some cases, Italy is one of them, we have a very strong soil degassing, so natural emission from the ground, from the soil. This is an example from Italy. In these cases, as in Italy, geothermal development appears in some areas of this situation. We have so to distinguish between the natural flow of gases from the underground to the surface with respect to what is emitted at the power plants. Let's take very synthetically, of course, I am simplifying the matter. When we have a strong degassing that is here depicted with these rows, with these arrows, when we put a power plant, we might have an emission from the plant, which comes from the various wells, and is concentrated at the plant, but the overall flow doesn't change with respect to the natural state. We might even have a concentration of these gas emission at the plant, which is recorded, of course, but the overall situation doesn't change, the overall contribution doesn't change, or we might have, for some reason, which are complex, and I am simply stating the point, we might have also an increase of emission due to the geothermal development. It is important to distinguish between these two cases, because in the first case, the overall contribution of the geothermal development is zero. For example, zero is the value that we have to put in an LCA analysis. And in the second case, it is the recorded value, but also corrected in some cases as a differential with respect to the natural state. So it is very important to understand these aspects, and further research is required. Other two main topics that requires some more work is the definition of best available technologies for abatement systems and define some standard for them, and also further understanding of health effects of long-term exposure, because we are not at a critical level, but this topic has created some concern in the public. So it is much better, not only for geothermal, but in general, and for research is required for health effects of emission, in particular for hydrogen sulfide emission, in geothermal and also in other contexts. But again, considering also natural emissions, so it's an overall research topic. These are the recommendations provided up to now in the GeoMV project, and these will be discussed today in the following session. Thank you.
So Adele, from presenter, now you become a moderator for the first session, and I give you again the floor.
Okay, thank you, Philippe. So we will start with session 1, and the first presenter. I do not see. Sorry, Philippe, can you put on the yes, Sara Montomoli from Enel Green Power will present the Italian case.
Good morning to everybody. Can you hear me? Adele?
Yes, we confirm.
Okay, perfect. So good morning to everybody. Today, from the Italian point of view, we would like to give you a framework of the Italian regulatory situation. And then we are going to show the best environmental practices that are implemented in the Bagnore 4 geothermal power plant. We will see some technology developed by Enel for environmental impact mitigation and to be compliant with the environmental constraints. And then we will go through the concept of substitute emissions that Adele already presented in the first presentation. And also new initiative carried out by Enel for further environmental impact mitigation. So let's go on with the case study of the Italian national and regional legislation. So we have to say that the Italian regulation is very, let me see if I can see. Okay, is very detailed and very strict. For example, at national level, it defines both air quality guidelines and emission limits guidelines. But at the regional level, specifically at Tuscany level, where the geothermal power plants in operation are located, there are further limits to geopower plants, recommended concentration thresholds, and there is also definition of emission limits, procedures for sampling and analysis of geo emissions, and it's defined also a maximum number of non-operational hours for plant and abatement system. So the actual regulation defines very high-level standards. So as you can see from the tables in the chart that there are concentration thresholds in air adopted in Tuscany for pollutants. Moreover, there are emission limits allowed from the Italian plants, from the geopower plants at the cooling tower. These limits are including the AMIS treatment. And also the maximum hours per day and per year of allowed plant stop. So this is a very, very strict regulation. Bagnore 4 represents for Enel the best environmental practice where many environmental improvements have been implemented. So Bagnore 4 is in operation since 2015, generating units of 20 megawatts each and 5 production wells. So the plant availability is very high, so it's higher than 99.5%. So the unavailability, maximum unavailability allowed is 18 hours per year. So this is a very strict regulation. And also the AMIS availability is higher than 99.5%. Regarding the environmental improvements that have been implemented in the Bagnore 4 power plant, there are innovative wet cooling towers, so that reduce the drift emissions. We have also the ammonia abatement process, both for the Bagnore 3 and 4 power plants. So we have 2 plants with, equipped with this process. The catalyst system of those 2 power plants are connected. So this is made in order to reduce the free emission during the power plant shutdown. So when one power plant is in maintenance, the other one can't treat the emission without sending to atmosphere. The AMIS process is optimized. And also the 2 AMIS plants are connected. So when one AMIS plant is shut down, the treatment is sent to the other plant in order to reduce the emission again. So for us, represent a benchmark for minimizing environmental impacts due to geothermal exploitation. Again, in the Amiata area, regarding the air quality monitoring, we have six stations active for air quality monitoring that are monitoring mainly H2S, radon, mercury, CO2, and ammonia. Data from air quality stations are validated daily and are sent monthly to the authorities and are made available via an online platform to the control authorities for further validation. There is also a continuous maintenance and calibration process for the monitoring stations, and specific campaign can be carried out for specific needs. Globally, Enel Green Power has 18 air quality stations at 8 meteorological stations installed in all the geothermal areas, and also there are available portable instruments for dedicated measurement campaigns. The Italian geothermal fluids can contain a considerable amount of uncondensable gases, so the percentage is between 1 and 10%. Those gases mainly consist of CO2, but also other pollutants are present like H2S and mercury. So all the Enel Green Power geothermal power plants are now equipped with the AMIS technology. So in 15-20 years, Enel Green Power has invested more than 150 million euros for the AMIS installation. And we see that the specific emission of H2S during the time, so during the installation of the plants, has improved a lot. So there is a very, very positive effect on the air quality from this point of view. In 2020, the controls authorities have highlighted that the 100% of the plant have been within the limits. So just to give you some numbers, the annual availability is between 90 and 95%. The emission reduction of H2S is higher than 90-95%, and as well as the mercury emission reduction. Also, from simulation and modeling studies that are experimentally validated by the air quality controls, there is a confirmation of an important improvement of air quality. So in these images, we can see a past scenario without the AMIS technology, and the current scenario with the AMIS technology. So we have to tell that there is one order of magnitude of the concentration of, in this case, H2S between the past and the current scenario. So the trend shown in this image is validated also by this experimentally validated modeling activity. So on top of the specific regulation on the emissions, we have to say that in 2019, a new regional law was issued in Tuscany. With this new regulation, there are defined a new obligation for the concessionaire to issue authorization and new concession. So the main points is that there is an obligation to transfer the CO2 for free. And also they define more restrictive limits to emission. Basically, the obligation on the CO2 consists of the obligation to transfer the 50% of the residual thermal energy and the 10% of the CO2 that is emitted. So this defined, of course, new research lines about projects for CO2 reuse. So regarding other new research lines that comes both from the GOMV recommendation and also that were confirmed by the European study on geothermal plants and application emissions, is that there is also an indication to limit the flow of direct emission with further mitigation measures. And one example is the methane removal from the gas stream that can reduce the climate change impact value up to 40%. So it's a very, very high impact on the reduction of climate change. And also, again, as Adele has already introduced it, the monitoring of the net of emission before the development of geothermal plants is a key factor to understand the real impact in terms of CO2 emission or emission in general of the presence of the geothermal power plants in a certain area. So let's deep dive now into the natural emission topic. So in the left image, it is represented the greenfield status, where there is a natural emission distributed from the soil. So with the presence in the right image of a geothermal power plants, there is an effect of reduction of the natural emission distributed from the soil, and there is an emission, of course, by the geothermal power plants. So with this concept, the emission from the soil decrease and are replaced by the gas that is emitted by the geothermal power plants. We have to say that the gas emitted by the plants are treated in general, in this case in Italy, through the AMIS technology. So compared to the natural ones, the emissions are less polluting. And with the presence of the cooling towers, the dispersion into the atmosphere compared to the natural one is better due to the presence of the cooling towers. So here in the left image, it is represented the thermal Italian situation that show a big thermal anomaly. It is often not considered that there is also a gas anomaly that is represented in this image that overlaps perfectly the thermal anomaly situation, that is the effect of a crustal thinning. The thermal anomaly is linked to natural emission anomaly, and CO2 is emitted from the soil even where there is no geothermal reservoir. In a recent study carried out by Professor Brana, measurements of CO2 emission from the soil in the Amiata area demonstrated that the natural emission is 10 times higher than the emission of the geothermal plants compared to the same area of interest. So this is a first result. So following this concept, if we look in detail to the zone with the geothermal plant presence that are represented in blue, we can compare with greenfield areas where similar soil emission anomaly is present that are represented in green. What we can say is that the total flux of natural emission in the green areas is basically the same as the natural emission from the soil in the blue areas plus the emission from the power plant. So this is the first evidence of the substitute emission concept. So we are preparing a paper on these studies that will be published in the next weeks, and it is a first quantitative result of this concept, the first concept. Further research is required to quantify better, of course, this effect. So from the GeoEnvy project and from the recommendation from the EU study on geothermal plants and application emission, there is a recommendation to limit the flow of direct emission with further mitigation measures. And it is defined as an example that burning or doing some electricity generation from methane should be introduced as a best practice. This is because methane in the LCA calculation in terms of climate change impact accounts about 40 times more than CO2. So if you do a calculation, removing the methane from the emission stream can reduce the climate change impact value up to 40%. So in Enel, we are developing an innovative process for methane abatement through a catalytic oxidation. In the past, Enel patented an innovative catalyst for application to the Italian geothermal gases and demonstrated that with this catalyst, the methane abatement efficiency is equal to 99%. So our objective is to test again for a longer period this catalyst in a pilot plant that will be developed in the next months. Just to finish my presentation, following the new Tosca regulation, we need to find new to use the CO2 in order to further reduce the impact of the geothermal presence. One example is the use of CO2 for biofixing in biomasses. For an example is the production of microalgae, spirulina, that can be produced using both the geothermal CO2 and the geothermal heat. In 2018 and 19, we completed the first pilot project to demonstrate the feasibility of this application. Geothermal CO2 can be used also for sparkling water and for the alimentary supply for other drinks. And studies on the production of chemicals can be carried out, for example, for the production of methane, methanol, and ethanol. In Italy, for our geothermal fields, we think that this is the most suitable solution to reduce the environmental impact of the CO2 presence. So for its reuse for different applications. So I have finished my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sara. We will discuss, we will have time to discuss and for questions later. And we pass to the second case study, which is from France. Guillaume, the floor is yours.
Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. My name is Guillaume Ravier. I'm working for Électricité de Strasbourg Géothermie, and I'm very pleased today to present you the French air quality framework for the geothermal industry. So the French framework is a mix of national regulation, for example, the mining, the environmental, and the labor codes. But there is also some regulation at the regional level, and mainly in the drilling permits and the exploitation permits. The main regulations are for hydrogen sulfide and methane, and there is some general regulation, and the main one is the general regulation on extractive industries. And these national regulation can be completed by some points in the drilling or exploitation permits. For the radionuclides, mainly for radon, there is a national decree for regulating these emissions, and there is also some complement in the general regulation on extractive industries. And for other aeriform emissions, like smell, there is some regulation in the drilling and exploitation permits, but we have to say that in France, we do not have any regulation about metal emission like mercury, arsenic or antimony. But currently, we do not have any plant that can emit such aeriform emissions. So that's why probably there is no regulation for this. So let's have a more detail about the regulatory requirements during drilling. So all olfactory nuisance must be prevented during drilling, and this is stated by the drilling permit. And all drilling rig must be equipped with a blowout preventer to prevent any gas blowouts, and as well a mud gas separator, a torch, and a windstock. This is mainly to prevent any risk of a methane explosion. And the drilling site must be equipped with 1 to 3 stations to monitor the hydrogen sulfide and methane. And during the drilling, there is a continuous air quality monitoring. The threshold for H2S is about 10 ppm, and the site manager must apply appropriate safety instruction during all the drilling. The drilling permit also states that some safety exercise must be performed about evacuation in case of H2S alarm or methane alarm. And in some case, the BOP, the mud separator, and the H2S or CH4 monitoring can be exempted, but it need to be proved that safety is okay for the drilling. And for example, it's mainly for the shallow wells that can prove this safety. And during the drilling, data are not public, it's only for mining authority. During operation, all plants must be designed and operated to prevent any olfactory nuisance. This is stated by the exploitation permit. And in case of hydrogen sulfide risk, some regulatory requirement can be precise in the exploitation permits. And there is only one case in France concerned by the H2S risk, and it is located in Bouillante, in Guadeloupe Island, where there is a geothermal power plant exploiting a volcanic hydrothermal reservoir. And around the plant, there is some hot spring and natural fumaroles. And the plant is designed with 2 flash units with a total capacity of 15 megawatt. So for this geothermal power plant, there is a continuous on-site monitoring for workers, and there is also an annual campaign around the power plant. There is 2 kinds of threshold, 2 for on-site workers, 5 and 10 ppms, and 10 ppms it's for the weekly period of work, and 5 ppm is the maximum for 8 consecutive hours. And there is also some different threshold around the plant based on the World Health Organization and OEHHA. And this is the same for drilling. Data are not public. This is just for mining authority. And there is also some special regulation about radon and radionuclides. And it is stated in the Ministerial Decree 2006-649. And it only concerns plants in the Upper Graben, in fact, because in the Upper Graben there is 2 power plants in operation, Rittershofen and Sulz, and 2 in development at Bandenheim and Ilkirch, and both power plants are exploiting a brine circulating into granitic folds. So in this granite, we can find some thorium and uranium isotopes, and also its daughters, and especially the radon we can find in the brine, but also in the aeriform emissions. But the risk is very minimized because all the geothermal plants are designed with pressurized geothermal closed geothermal loops with full brine and gas reinjection. So there is very few gas released into the atmosphere during operation. So, however, the ministerial decree states that we have to do an annual campaign on site and around the power plant. and especially on the closest public building and also on the closest neighborhood in the prevailing wind. So here you have an example of the Rittershofen plant, where the plant is here, and here is the closest population, and here the closest public building. And here you have a view of the prevailing wind. And during the first campaign, we also did some measurement outside of the prevailing wind because we couldn't the decree was not in place before the operation, so we didn't have the baseline, but we did some measurement outside of the prevailing wind, and in fact the measurement showed that the radon measurement is in the baseline of this area. So currently there is no threshold about radon emissions, but maybe in the future the French regulation can be improved for this. And again, data are not public, but only for mining authority. So if we have, if we compare the French framework with the GeoEnvis recommendation, about the air quality monitoring during well drilling, it is mandatory, especially for methane and hydrogen sulfide. And it is also mandatory to install a BOP and to have a trained personnel on site during the drilling. The only thing which is not clearly mandatory is the air quality monitoring during well flow test, but most of the time it's 1 or 2 weeks, but not longer. Data are also due to the authority. This is also mandatory. And air quality baseline must be performed also for hydrogen sulfide and radon before the operation, but it's not mandatory for CO2 and metals, as I already mentioned. Continuous or frequent air check, quality check is also mandatory, and it's not continuous but frequent because it's annual air quality checks. And abatement plan to contain emission is not really clearly mandatory, and because in the exploitation permit, it is mentioned that plants should be operated with lowest possible air emission, but it doesn't give any idea of how to do that. So this can be probably evolution of the French framework. And concerning the total reinjection, this is the case for the brine, but it's not completely mandatory for gas total reinjection. So here you have a nice view of the French air quality framework for the geothermal industry. So I give back the floor.
Thank you, Guillaume, for the clear presentation. Again, questions to the next session, and then so now we give the floor to Marta Ross Karlsdottir, talking about the Icelandic case study. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We cannot see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, so here, and I hope I'm presenting the right screen. Can you see my presentation as well?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So nice to be here with you all, and I'm going to present a national overview for Iceland and this experience that we have at On Power with operating 2 geothermal power plants close to the capital city of Reykjavik in terms of air quality. So it's just the content of my presentation. I want to go through the background of geothermal energy in Iceland, go over the main geothermal emission regulations, show you the mitigation methods that we have implemented at our facilities, and recommend best practices, especially for the Icelandic case. And then I am happy to, or I look forward to the discussions. But as you probably, many of you know, Iceland depends largely on geothermal utilization. So we cover over half of our primary energy demand with geothermal resources, mainly due to that 90% or over 90% of our heat demand is covered by geothermal district heating systems. and also 30% roughly of our electricity production comes from geothermal resources, and the rest from hydropower. So geothermal has already replaced the use of fossil fuels in the Icelandic energy system along with hydropower. So we have managed to reach a 100% renewable electricity production almost, with some few exceptions of backup power and so on. And the rest of the fossil fuels are then used for transportation and some industrial processes. So we have a particular situation here in Iceland. We've already finished our energy transition in our energy systems, aside for transportation and air fleet and ship fleet and so on. The main geothermal emissions in Iceland are H2S, hydrogen sulfide, and CO2. So that is the emissions that are most regulated and most monitored. You can see here an overview of, excuse me, it's not the most recent one, but it includes all the major power plants in Iceland except for one that operates on geothermal resources. And we have the case of having very different emissions from each power plant because of the site-specific conditions. And some of the power plants have very high H2S emissions, and then in return low CO2 emissions. And then the others have the other way around, high CO2 emissions and fairly low concentration of H2S. The power plants that I am operating are located close to Reykjavik city. The Hellisheiði and Nesjavellir power plants, producing both electricity and hot water for district heating. And they are the power plants in Iceland that have the most H2S concentration, highest H2S concentration, and have significant H2S emissions coming from the power plants, while the CO2 emissions are fairly low compared to other power plants in Iceland. This is our challenge. You can see here the plume coming from the cooling towers at Hellisheiði. During calm winds and high or strong winds in the upper atmosphere, we get this steam plume kind of, in a singular stream blowing straight to the Reykjavik city. And within this steam plume are the non-condensable gases that are not abated, such as the hydrogen sulfide. And this basically means that the entire stream of H2S does not disperse in the atmosphere, but flows directly to the capital city and causes, of course, odor nuisance. And also we have had instances of going over the regulatory limits. So this was something that we had to deal with mitigation methods, and we have already implemented them successfully. So the main regulation on CO2 is basically annual reporting of CO2 emissions from power plants. And then we have, of course, as a nation, complied to the 55% reduction target of the EU in CO2 emissions compared to the 1990 levels before 2030. And we have set out an action plan for Iceland as a whole, and to reach that target. And the action plan already includes almost zero emitting geothermal industry as a whole in Iceland. So the government expects the geothermal industry to develop methods and implement them to lower the CO2 emissions almost down to zero. And as I told you before, geothermal has already substituted fossil fuels in the energy system. So we have already avoided CO2 emissions from especially heating plants prior to geothermal covered by fossil fuels. So we have annual savings of roughly 3 million tons of CO2 compared to using fossil fuels as a heating source, and in turn using geothermal resources, and over 100 million tons of accumulated savings since 1940s. So it's a challenge, of course, to have already low emitting power plants in terms of CO2 and then making them zero emitting. That is definitely a challenge. Regarding the H2S, the main regulations are showed here. We have regulation on annual reporting of H2S emissions from different power plants. We have pollution limits in the workplace, and we have H2S concentration limits outside of industrial areas. And you see the table here that we have stricter limits than the World Health Organization publishes. So we have a maximum annual average of 5 or 0.004 ppms, while the other limits in terms of work environment and so on are similar as to what was presented for France in the previous presentation. So fairly strict H2S limits in Iceland, and it's mainly because of these instances from our power plants close to Reykjavik city, where we had some odor nuisance and high H2S concentration levels that were not acceptable by the public. So these limits were further increased after the power plant was built. Air quality measurement stations are located in strategic areas around the power plant and also in various places in Reykjavik city and other municipalities. Here are the locations of our 2 power plants. We have air quality stations located at the power plant site to measure the air quality there. And we also own and operate as a power plant operator for other stations in the closest kind of habitated areas around the power plant to monitor H2S levels. And these are not basically not mandatory stations, but a part of our operations to follow up on how we are doing in minimizing H2S levels in habitated areas. So many of you probably have heard about the Carbfix method that we are have implemented and are using in Iceland, or particularly at Hellisheiði geothermal plant in Iceland, where we are re-injecting CO2 and H2S back into the reservoir just through our regular re-injection system, because we re-inject all of the effluent from the power plant back into the reservoir. And now we have been operating a air or gas capture plant that injects the gas stream as well with the geothermal fluid. And this has allowed us to increase our decrease our carbon footprint by 30% since 2014, when the station went into operation, the station that we have in operation today. And for the hydrogen sulfide, we have managed to reduce the emissions by 70 to 80% since 2014. So that has basically kept us compliant with the newest regulation of the stricter H2S levels in habitated areas. But we have plans for the future. As I said, we are basically relied upon to be a zero-emitting industry in Iceland before 2030 to comply with the 55% reduction target. And we are now planning for a big full-scale gas capture plant at Hellisheiði to reduce the footprint of that plant down to almost 0 or 95%. And then we plan on moving to our other power plant at Nesjavellir to do the same. And this will then allow us to be almost completely zero emitting both of CO2 and H2S. Here are a few pictures of the Hellisheiði site and how the Carbfix project has, the success story of the Carbfix project has basically allowed us to minimize our footprint in terms of H2S and CO2, and with further plans of increasing that even more. These are the calcite crystals that form when the CO2 is mineralized within the basaltic rocks. And this is the plant, the gas capture plant at Hellisheiði, the scrapping tower that mixes the non-condensable gases with the geothermal fluid. And we also have plans for utilization, carbon capture and utilization. We have already an algae production plant located close to the Hellisheiði plant that will in the future receive CO2 stream from our power plant for utilization and growing of microalgae. So to the best practice recommendation in Iceland, regarding the well testing, we do not have a lot of regulations limiting our actions in well testing, but we do have licensing requiring us to limit the time of well testing. And it's mainly because of water effluents that can flow in unprotected or in spoiled natural circumstances, but also for gaseous emissions to minimize them. Then we do remove the H2S with the sulfix or Carbfix method at the Hellisheiði plant, but no other power plant is doing so in Iceland. And we of course recommend doing so. But we have the special condition of being located close to habitated areas where other geothermal plants in Iceland are often very remote. So the H2S levels are not a nuisance in habitated areas close to those power plants. And we of course recommend to monitor H2S levels in a broader perspective than maybe the national environmental agencies do. So we have our own stations operational to increase the measurements of H2S levels and follow up with them. And then we have shown, and we are going to show further, that there is a possibility to reach almost zero footprint in geothermal applications by using the Carbfix method. And it is economical, although it's often or is always added cost of adding a mitigation method to the operations. But it is economical, and we think it's especially important where CO2 emissions are high from these types of power plants. So that was all from me. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Icelandic situation.
Thank you, Marta-Rós. Thanks a lot for all these very important and interesting case studies. So I give the floor to Guillaume for the next session, where you will have occasion to discuss also about the details of these 3 case studies.
So do you see my screen or not yet? I guess. Yeah. Now you should see my screen. So we will move to the session 2, the roundtable, how to improve of emission in the geothermal project. And first, we will have a feedback from the panelists about this topic and the GeoEnvi's recommendation. Then we will have a discussion with the panelists, discussion with the audience, and at the end of this webinar, we will also have a short final survey. So I will give the floor first to Dorothée, ladies first. So I give the floor to Dorothée.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
And also, okay. Yes, so thank you for inviting. I mean, I just start with a short introduction of myself and then maybe with my feedback regarding the recommendations and the report, right?
Yeah, perfect, Dorothée.
So, okay, hello. I am Dorothée Siefert. I studied applied geoscience in Karlsruhe in Germany. And since 2018, I am a PhD student also at KIT in the Department of Geochemistry and Economic Geology, with the focus on CO2 handling, mainly in our small Procel power plant within the surface installation. I am working also for NBW, one of the biggest energy company in Germany, there in the research and development department, focusing on geothermal development. NBW has a share of the Sulzu-Forêt plant, and yeah, together with ES Geothermal or with ES, and is operator now for about 10 years of the Procel power plant in the Upper Rhine-Graben on the German side. So yeah, thank you, Guillaume, for inviting me to join the webinar. So I know the GeoEnvi project already a some years now and follow the work and appreciate the work of the consortium. Also, for example, I followed the LCA studies about the geothermal plants and the recommendations there. And I also attended 2 meetings in Brussels in 2018, I guess, and 2019 regarding the EU Commission study on geothermal plants and applications emissions. So yeah, I have some general remarks concerning the recommendations on the environmental regulations. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that already the selection of the relevant technical and process-related topics and the structuring in the report or in the project took quite some time. But in my opinion, the outcome is very useful, like with the different technical topics with the seismicity, the aquifers interference, the discharge of geothermal fluids are very important topics. And of course, today's topic as well, the aeriform emissions. So I think these are also main topics for public concerns and which are covered now. And yeah, at least what I can say for Germany, these are the main concerns as well. So one of the most important structuring that was done in the recommendation report, I would say, was to structure the aeriform emissions regulations in the different project development phase, like for drilling and for the operational phase. Of course, this is very important and very different, and also, I guess, for the different countries. And would be my next, yeah. And yeah, of course, the projects and all the countries differ very, or are differ because of the diverse geology and the resource we just saw with Iceland and France and also for Italy. So I really liked the recommendation regarding I think in Hungary it was that the analyses are like strictly detailed in a decree or regulated. And also I would suggest that also the sampling, like the frequency of the sampling and how the sampling is done for the gases and the water analysis are parallelized or maybe recommended as well, like best practices. And yeah, and above that, I think the recommendations regarding the further research regarding gas total reinjection in the different countries, I think there are some solutions and still to develop. So I think this is very useful. Yeah. So this would be my feedback.
Thank you very much, Dorothee, for your feedback.
I think I didn't stress the time limit.
Yeah, thank you. So now I give the floor to Alessandro. Alessandro, do you? Yeah. Oh, we don't hear you, Alessandro.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. This is Alessandro Lenzi. I'm from Energy Power Company, and I have as a duty the development of technologies for the environmental impact of geothermal plants. So I have a long-time experience about topics on the H2S treatment and recently about carbon dioxide evaluation on plants and also on geothermal areas. First of all, I want to thank all the persons that have shown their best practice. It was very interesting and clear. So I hope I will be able to also answer the question that will be proposed during the discussion. Okay.
Okay. So sorry. So maybe Gabor can give his feedback, and then we can go to the discussion.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I also welcome everyone. I feel a little bit outsider here because I was not the member of this project, but Anna Maria Nador, who was, asked me to take part here. I'm basically geochemist, so I give you information about the pragmatical way from geothermal usage. Just some words. I promise I won't be long. So I work at the University of Szeged as a senior lecturer, and I am one of the leader of the biggest geothermal heating system which built and operating here in Szeged. Szeged is the town is located in the southern part of Hungary, and is very famous about the geothermal usage. We use the geothermal energy for heating, and when it will be finished, it will be the biggest heating system in the country. It will be operating with how many? So it's about 30 wells. So we will have, and we have, a lot of problems with methane, because in the neighborhood it means the distance between the biggest oil and gas field from the geothermal wells is about 10 kilometers. So we have a lot of problems with methane. Unfortunately, I'm not very well expertise in the regulations. I just know the practical things. Maybe if you are curious, I can tell you some words about that. How does it work in Hungary?
Yeah, of course, you can give the Hungarian framework, yeah.
Okay, but now or later?
Yes, you can give it now, and then we can discuss with some question afterward.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I saw these presentations, I was very curious, because I feel here in Hungary there is not many regulated. So we have a National Mining Act, which contains some regulations about the limits and thresholds, but as a practical expertise man, I can say we use the geothermal systems without any air regulations. We try to minimize the methane emissions here, so we have a lot of research and development project here at the university. For that, how can we reduce the methane from the geothermal wells? Because the oil and gas field in the neighborhood has a big impact to the working of and operating of these geothermal wells. And in this oil and gas field operates the biggest gas storage system in Hungary. So when it is filled, we have a lot of methane in the geothermal wells. So it's an actually problem. So we plan a lot of gas engine systems to reduce the methane. It means the methane content is about 1,000 liters in every cubic meter thermal water, so it's much. And now we have started to minimize with gas engine systems, but here in Hungary there is a lot of things to do in the field of research and development reducing geothermal emissions. So I think if you have any idea or if you have any possibility to give us some good practice, it will be it will be fine. So
Okay.
thank you.
So maybe now we can give the floor to Ricardo. Ricardo, are you here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, yeah.
Also, can you see me also? Okay.
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, just a few words. I am presently Vice President of UGA, that is the Italian Geothermal Association. And in the past, I would say, unfortunately, I'm a little old, and I worked for all my life in the frame of geothermal energy and environmental impact assessment. I worked for 10 years in Enel Green Power, and then for 30 years as geothermal consultant and environmental consultant. So I would say that more or less I covered all the different topics related to geothermal energy development. As far as I have some comments about what I heard this morning, and it seems to me that all the recommendations that are presented in the frame of the GeoMV project are very useful, and I think that will be applied in the near future. I have only one problems about the proposal for a long-term effect of H2S on long-term exposure, because in my opinion this is not a good idea, because for instance in Larderello area H2S is present in the population since 7 centuries, and there are no evidence of long-term effects of H2S, as is clearly stated by all the World Organization Health, WHO. And so it seems to me that no further work is necessary in this respect. Some comments about the emissions in geothermal energy utilization. I would say that we have two types of problems: greenhouse emission and pollutant emissions. And as far as pollutant emissions are concerned, I would say that the regulations are quite similar in the country where these are developed, and also both during drilling and during operational phase. The main pollutant is H2S, and that is quite regulated. And one comment about what we saw. I would say most of geothermal power plants utilize flash type power plants with direct contact steam condenser associated with wet cooling towers. And it is clear that hydrogen sulfide is emitted not only from the gas extractor, but also from the cooling, natural cooling towers. So one question is whether this problem is studied in Italy and in Iceland to reduce emission of H2S also from cooling towers. The second is as far as greenhouse emissions are concerned. I would say that in this case, we understand very well that carbon dioxide emissions are natural emissions, but also that are concentrated in the power plants. So I would like to know some more about the carbon fix process in Iceland. Because it seems to me that the quantity of carbon dioxide emitted, at least in high carbon dioxide fluid as in Italy and also in Turkey, the quantity of carbon dioxide is large that the possibility to transform carbon dioxide in a solid, it seems to me very difficult to manage. So in this respect, I would like to discuss about the possibility to reinject carbon dioxide for a total reinjection process. So this is all, and I am.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. And maybe we can start the discussion with Marta if she more detail about the carb fix.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Ricardo. We of course have this pilot and the first industrial scale gas capture plant at the geothermal power plant in Iceland. And the industrial scale plant has been in operation since 2014. And of course, the research exceeded that, prior to that time for a couple of years or a few years, testing this technology and this method. And of course, we have basically confirmed this method to be applicable in basaltic rocks. But now there is a fairly large project ongoing, doing research on whether this method is applicable in other rock formations, which is the GECKO project. It's a European EU Horizon 2020 funded project. So the results from that, I think, will be available in the coming years or in the recent future. So, but they have published or done research on the potential of mineralizing CO2 and H2S in other rocks and basalt, and will hopefully confirm that with this research project that is now ongoing. We are reinjecting roughly 13,000 tons of CO2 annually today, currently in our station. And we expect to go up to roughly 35,000 tons annually, which is almost the entire CO2 stream from the Hellisheiði plant. And regarding the H2S emissions, they're roughly 10,000 tons annually of H2S. Will be reinjected with a large station that is under development and will be coming online in 2025. But currently we are reinjecting roughly 6,000 to 7,000 tons of H2S. And this method is applicable to other cases than Hellisheiði, definitely. You have to adjust the scrapping process to the gas content of the particular power plant in question. And the stronger the CO2 stream, the better, as I understand it. So plants with higher CO2 contents or concentrations will benefit from that by using this method, and it will become more economical than in our case, having fairly little CO2 concentration in our reservoirs. So yeah, I think this method is definitely applicable, especially, as I've said, within basaltic formations, but also hopefully to be shown to be applicable in other rock formations as well.
So, but may I, another question, but is the kinetics of the reaction between carbon dioxide and the solids? Because I imagine it's very low, and so
no, yeah, no, it is actually very high, and it has shown that the entire stream of carbon dioxide has mineralized within 2 years of reinjection. And we have a consistent monitoring system taking tracer measurements regularly that have confirmed both the modeling aspects of the project that have modeled this fairly short reaction time of CO2 into basaltic rocks, and then we have confirmed it with our operations and tracer testing and so on during the operation. So it's one of the fastest methods that has been shown to be able to mineralize CO2 and store it permanently. Yeah, so that has shown some great results as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Marta. So I prepared some questions for the panelists. So maybe the first one already been discussed. And how could we implement this recommendation into the EU or national regulation? Do you think that we need a kind of EU directive for the geothermal industry, or maybe not only for the air emission, but maybe for other topics also? I ask to all the panelists.
May I?
Yeah, of course, Ricardo.
Yes, I totally agree that it'd be very useful to prepare a sort of guideline to let me say, to direct the environmental impact evaluation process, because my experience is then when you go to discuss with authorities, very often you find persons that are experts in their own sector, but they don't know anything about the geothermal industry. So it would be very important that a sort of guideline be prepared, and to help all the investors in processing good environmental impact study to be submitted to the authority. Of course, I understand also that this is very difficult, but it would be very important that a general consent could be found in how are the threshold and the limit that must be respected during environmental process. So I am in favor for this.
Okay. Alessandro, did you want to comment, or?
I have just
Sarah.
Can you hear me?
Sarah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, we have just one comment about the specific control on air quality. Currently, air quality control is made before and after a geothermal project implementation. So one important thing that we think is important to highlight is that there is no a complete database and characterization of the emission sources. We are talking about the natural emission sources and not natural, but not related to the geothermal activity. So we think that will be good that at the European and national level, the authorities should promote the screening and the characterization activities of these sources that can be very useful for the operator and to assess the real impact of the geothermal activity in relation to those emission sources.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Can I add a comment, please?
Yeah, of course.
We think that the air quality topic is very important for all the nation, of course, and we have a good experience in Tuscany with this complex pathway to follow the environmental issues of geothermal energy. As already shown by Sarah, there is an emission regulation, air quality standards, and so on. So we could also consider that this standard could be a reference also for other nations, as it is inspired to international standards. If you go to the H2S reference levels that are currently working as an average of 24 hours or 14 days or 90 days, they are all inspired to World Age organization, so they can be used as a reference. And of course, I agree with Sarah that the air quality measurements doesn't take in account of the different contribution of what we are measuring. As an example is the H2S. The H2S can be derived by natural emission and also from the plants. The plants are very well known and measured. The natural sources are still under discussion. So an improvement on the technologies and the way to measure them and to characterize them should be a good goal for the next future.
Yeah, this is one of the questions. How could we easily measure the CO2 emission by the plant, but mostly by natural emission? So how I was interested in the Sarah's presentation about the studies, which will be soon published. How the CO2 measurement was performed for this study?
Okay, if you want, I can try for
okay.
a simple answer. The carbon dioxide emission is, of course, measured also in our plants, but what is important is the contribution of the natural sources. And basically, we can have two different types of situation. One is on the greenfield areas in which no plant is still running, so it should be performed on a comparison between the situation, the baseline before the plant utilization and after plant utilization, in order to make a comparison. Why this? This is because we are confident that the interaction between the plant and the geothermal field can give an evolution on also on the natural emissions. This is one way. The other one, which is a little bit more difficult, is the comparison in the areas in which there is already running a plant, a geothermal plant. In this case, we must perform a comparison with surrounding areas not too far, which can be considered as a reference of the emission from the soil, and to perform a comparison between the two areas. So there is a comparison within, with a before and after, and between areas with surrounding areas compared to the geothermal plants. In every case, a protocol, a system must be performed, an instrumental equipment must be set up, and in each case, the problem is quite recent. So we think that some further deepening or research should be performed in order to better understand this phenomenon, as already shown by Sarah in the slides.
Okay, but this is mainly measurement on site. There is no like global measurement with satellite or with, I don't know.
Right.
May
It is on
I
site, yes.
So, excuse me.
Yeah.
I would like to add some point regarding the carbon dioxide measurements, because as you probably know, the carbon dioxide flux measurements at the ground are a prospection method to identify possible good area for geothermal development. Yeah. But what it's important to underline is that in this case you measure both the biogenetic carbon dioxide plus magmatic carbon dioxide, and what you identifying this type of measurement is the sum of two, and in case that you find a flux, anomalous flux, you may identify where there is a natural emission. So, in my opinion, this type of measurements in a geothermal area, new or exploited, is very difficult, and it presents also differences in interpretations. So, I would avoid to put this type of approach for the characterization of an area for a further development. Also, I see also at the same time difficulties in let me say to have not disturb the situation for air quality, because as you know, to have air quality baseline, you need at least 1 year of monitoring. So this could be very, very heavy for further development. So.
Okay.
I can
Yes,
reply if you want.
Yes, Alessandro, please. Sorry.
So for the high quality, we know that the problem is a long-term monitoring, and the current system is working on the main pollutant, for instance, the H2S or the mercury. And as already shown by Sarah, there is a running network with more than 20 years monitoring history in Italy. For carbon dioxide, I think that the matter is quite different. As already pointed out, some research is necessary, but we must not neglect some data that we have already reached with one of the system which is a standard in the research area, which is the soil flow rate method. We'd agreed to measure the cumulative or the total amount of carbon dioxide, and it has been used to us in order to make a first screening of what is happening in some areas which are important. The data shown by Sarah was about the Amiata area, and it was important to us to highlight what was the difference between non-geothermal developed areas compared to the areas in which some power plants are present, and this has taken us to a concept of the substitution. That means that in the area in which some geothermal development is running, we expect a depletion of carbon dioxide, as already observed historically, for instance, in the Larderello area, all the natural emissions were completely disappeared after a few years after the industrial development. The case of the Amiata is the second way, the comparison between site areas to prove the concept of the substitution of carbon dioxide, which is what we are dealing currently.
Okay, Marta would like to comment the flue measurement of CO2 and H2S here.
Yeah, just first a regular or general comment on these recommendations, which I find to be very relevant, and I can kind of relate to all of the recommendations that are made within the report. And I actually support the long-term the research on long-term exposure to H2S, because it's such a relevant debate in Iceland, and we don't have the tools to answer that debate at the moment. So we are in Iceland, at least, are in favor of increasing research on the long-term effects of H2S on population. But at the same time, I also agree with the discussion of this natural flux, or flux from natural phenomena, geothermal phenomena, both regarding H2S and CO2. H2S is a geothermal gas that we can smell all over Iceland because of fumaroles and geysers and so on. We have even towns or municipalities been built around active areas. So often we have the conflict of having to answer for if elevated H2S concentrations are due to the power plant or due to natural occurring emissions, and we do not have the tools to answer that at the moment. So some kind of common guidelines on how to assess these natural phenomena versus the geothermal utilization plants would be really interesting for us. But for the CO2, we have done some research in Iceland on natural CO2 fluxes from different sites, and they show conflicting results. Some do not show a large amount of CO2 flux from areas located around the geothermal resource, and then you have quite some emissions, CO2 emissions from a power plant that is then being built at the location. And then we have also seen the other way around, that we have CO2 fluxes being measured prior to utilization, and then the natural fluxes have decreased after the site has been taken into utilization. So we are not, at least in Iceland, the debate on natural emissions versus plant emissions is not very developed. It's very kind of due to these conflicted results. So we have not been pushing forward very strongly to take these natural emissions into consideration. But we would, of course, want to reach kind of a common methodology to assess this, and it would be really beneficial to kind of try to understand the difference between Italy and Iceland, for example, Turkey and so on. So I'm really a fan of doing that. But one thing I want to add as well, what was missing from or maybe not missing from the recommendation, but I wanted to add a comment. A debate in Iceland on H2S has been around corrosion and corrosive powers of H2S and on especially sensitive electrical equipment. And we have had a lot of debate on that. It's one of the strongest opponents of the geothermal power plants are pointing at that. And I would love to see some research being done on that, and I haven't found one to date, at least. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marta, for your comment. So maybe we can take some questions from the audience. We already have one from Tugbanur, I guess from Turkey. And maybe the Italians could answer, what is the effect of CO2 emission on agricultural area? Is there any change in parameter before project and next to the plants? Maybe Tuscany have some agricultural area close to the plants?
Yes, we have agricultural area and also greenhouses that are very, very close to the power plants. So in general, there is no side effect on the agricultural species in that area related to the geothermal emissions. So the geothermal resource is considered by the agricultural farmers and everybody who is having activities close to our power plants as a resource, not as a problem. So for us, it's a positive effect.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if somebody else wants to add something, but yes, this is my view.
One thing to add is the difference in concentration due to the CO2 emissions is so low that is not cannot do anything. So it's clear,
Yes,
no?
of course. The effect of spreading of the cooling towers is difficultly visible through the air quality data on carbon dioxide. So there is no, in our opinion, no appreciable difference between the baseline of carbon dioxide and the value with the power plants. About the carbon dioxide, however, we think that it is a source. It is something important for the agricultural use. As a matter of fact, we are planning to think about the reuse of carbon dioxide for food and beverage industry or for agricultural uses, for instance, for greenhouses as a carbon source available to rice plants. That's a more modern way, more efficient way to think about the carbon dioxide on our plants.
Yeah. And in the past, did you perform some investigation on agriculture when the AMI system was not implemented with the mercury or H2S? Yeah, maybe more mercury impact on agriculture.
Okay, I can answer.
Yeah.
The monitoring protocols that are required by the Tuscan region are concerning also the presence of some pollutants in the vegetables or on the fruits that are used, and this monitoring is conducted in the surrounding areas of the recently authorized plants. And at the moment, we didn't observe any special values on the vegetables. So
okay.
There is no measurable effect of these pollutants on the surrounding areas.
Okay, thank you, Alessandro. And there is a question to Marta. Is Marta still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, there is a question from Beata. How about possibility that the calcite formed due to the CO2 injection will decrease the geothermal reservoir rocks permeability? Did you observe something?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we have also looked into that. We are, of course, re-injecting on the borders of the actual production site, so it's not within the production site itself. But we are using it as a re-injection site, and we need to allow for flow of quite a substantial flow of geothermal brine through the re-injection site. So we are concerned about, or were concerned about if this would clog up the pathways of flow. But as with the basaltic rock that we are re-injecting in, it contains so much available space And also the mineralization doesn't happen until at a certain radius from the exit of the well. So our models do not show any danger of kind of clogging up or reducing the flow of reinjected water, despite the fact that this CO2 is being mineralized. So there's plenty of space in the bedrock to capture the CO2 and mineralize it.
Okay, thank you, Marta, for your precision. Thanks. And Iker has her hand left. Raise the hand. So I don't know if she has a comment or questions, maybe. No, well, okay. So I have a question for you, because we discussed about the CO2 collection maybe for beverage, for example. Most of the CO2 used by the industry is coming from the ammonia industry, and there is less and less ammonia industry in Europe because it's cheaper to do this in Middle East at the moment. So do you think that CO2 recovery could be a good opportunity for the geothermal industry?
I don't know if I can maybe answer first.
Yeah.
I think
Marta, let's go.
Yeah, we believe so. We are currently building what we call a burn and scrub station, where we are trying to isolate further the CO2 stream from our geothermal gases, so it can be utilized in, for example, the algae production example that I presented before. And we have, there are vast opportunities in supplying CO2 to the Icelandic industry. As you mentioned before, in Italy, is carbonated drinks and so on. So, but the problem is the economics maybe at the moment. So these are all in research scale and operated on grants and so on. So we're pretty dependent on achieving some kind of funds for exploring this option, at least in Iceland, because of the low concentration of CO2 and the high concentration of H2S, and it's difficult to separate those streams economically.
Okay. Alessandro, did you want to comment?
Yes, it's very similar, but we are confident that the demand of carbon dioxide will increase in the next future. So this will be a source for the industry, also in Italy. And as already shown by Sarah, the new laws run in Tuscany have a 10% of carbon dioxide to be available to the industry. So our company has decided to make available the carbon dioxide to the industrial operators also for free. So it can be a good opportunity for all the interested industries on this source.
This is like the circular economy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and our CO2 is already available after the AMIS treatment. So the gas that is available is mainly CO2 plus other components. But I think compared to the Iceland, we are quite lucky on this point of view, because the percent of CO2 is higher in our fluids and is already available after treatment. So it's easier probably for us to think about new uses for CO2, but in an economical way for the industrial operators that want to use it. And we need to make it available for free in any case, so as it is. So yes, it's a discussion that we can we start with the operators that are interested in the use of the CO2.
Thank you, Sarah.
If I can add an information, regarding the last point of the slide, no? The carbon dioxide storage is a process which depends strongly on the kind of reservoir you have and the non-condensable gases amount. So what is successfully running in Iceland is due to the presence of at least 3 key factors: low carbon content, and a large amount of water to dissolve the carbon dioxide and H2S, and also the special features of the bed rocks or the hosting rocks, which are chemically reactive on carbon dioxide and H2S. This is situation, for instance, not present in Italy, in which the gas content is very high. There is practically no water available to perform the carb fix process, and also the hosting rocks are different in respect to the Iceland. So it is a very special situation side by side, in which we can perform a kind of treatment of carbon dioxide reinjection. That's why we are thinking that it's much better to think of carbon dioxide as an opportunity for the industrial used, as also as in the perspective of the circular economy. So it can be a source, interesting source for the industrial partners.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe we can finish this webinar with the survey. So I will send the question in the chat. So if the participant can open the question and respond, there is 7 questions. So the first one, the first question is about the satisfaction about the GeoEnvy recommendation. Yes. Thank you for the first question. The second one, I send it in the chat also. Is about the recommendation at EU level, if we need or not more regulation at EU levels. It can be guidelines, but maybe stronger, like directives. Now the third one is in the chat. Yes. The third one is about the promotion of the abatement system, like the AMIS technology developed by Enel, because it's installed in all plants in Italy, but it could be also installed in other parts of the world. Maybe not in France, because we don't have any geothermal flash plant in France, but maybe in Guadeloupe Island, for example. The fourth questions. So we see that we should promote this technology developed by Enel or other technology, of course. So the fourth question is about the opportunity for the geothermal industry for the CO2 recovery. So the audience think that it could be a good opportunity for the geothermal industry, mainly maybe to develop, as our colleagues from Enel explained, the circular economy around the plants. So I send the fifth questions, which is about the measurement of natural emission, and if you think that more R&D should be performed on CO2 emission, mainly for natural emission to compare with natural plus power plant in operation. So maybe it could be a good subject for next European research program. The sixth questions is about H2S further understanding. So we saw that maybe the Icelandic people have a different opinion than the Italians, but do you think that further investigation need to be done on long-term H2S exposure? Yeah. And the last questions is about the zero emissions power plant. It was one of the ongoing recommendations. Do you think that further research is needed for zero emission and total reinjection? So it not only means brine, but also gas, of course. And maybe in some contexts, it's not possible to have a zero emission because of the reservoir or the geological context. Yeah, so we see that we could have some more research on this topic. So I would like to thank you all the panelists for their participation to this webinar, all the audience also. And I don't know if Philippe is still there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we can thank everybody, the participants. We were about 90 people today. And of course, the contributors, the panelists, the speakers. I hope you enjoy this event. And as I was mentioning, it's part of a series of events on from GeoEnvy on different topics. We have treated last week licensing and regulation. This week was about air quality, and next week is about seismicity, another interesting topic after what happened in some places last year. I thank you all for your attendance, and I wish you a nice day. See you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.